yet.
It's not moving.
Votes. Yeah, they moved it off the dock. It's not getting votes because it's not going to.
All right, it's just chilling.
So
it's what they call a slow roll.
Listen, there was other.
Someone's got to write a check.
There's other bills that got introduced, right?
Mm-hmm. And he was one of them. He was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He co-authored with somebody else, and I can't remember.
Alan, what was it?
Exactly the details.
Somebody tell it to me.
Was it 5207?
Just introduced. I don't know, but one of them was to do. One of the solutions to this issue was to do better training. Oh, I know. I think his was to not change anything.
House Bill 5704.
Listen, not to change
anything. It negates
anything.
local ordinances.
It what?
It keeps local ordinances from overriding the state law.
That was his was? Okay, that's not a bad one.
No, it is a bad one. The Republicans were elected on, we're going to have local control for everybody. And then they got in and they're like, oh, no, you can't
just
make your own.
kidding. Well, then they make laws that supersede the state law. That's what we're saying. If there's some kind of... But anyways, and we certainly don't want the broke cities to be motivated by financial motivations to do forfeitures or whatnot. One of the introduced bills was a suggestion that after the property is taken, they have to immediately present it to the prosecutor's got to sign off on it, and then go get an order from the court that it's justified or something like that. Can you imagine? That's a lot more work from everybody. It should be done. That was always, the those that have trained the state police and to say that the issue is that there's not enough investigating going on before they get into and take the forfeited property. In other words, there's no conception, there's no contemplation of whether or not the person could legitimately own it or not. There's no investigation leading up to it. There's no a forethought of what would be reasonable for them to own and have information about what their income is. They filed taxes, and this is the investigation part that was complained about that doesn't take place anymore. They just execute a warrant, go in there, looks like that's drug stuff, and they just take it. As opposed to, we know that we got subpoenas, or they get tax records before they or whatever, and they know that they have reported certain amount of income every year. They see what kind of job they have. They walk in the house and see someone's making $50,000, $80,000 a year. It looks like a $50,000, $80,000 living arrangement, as opposed to something that looks like someone like that couldn't have those kind of things. That's what I'm saying. And he said that's just hard work, police officer investigating stuff. And it's true. There's nothing done. Like, it's so random now. It's so commonplace. Do you know what I mean? Like it is. It's kind of a testament to where we are in the world, and it's something that I think is and something that's important to point out. The person I'm referring to is Ted Nelson, who was discussing when we used to do these kind of things. The only way to really have an understanding of what property is subject to forfeiture is to know what property they have or should have, if any. So it was trying to get that kind of information. What we know is that the only way to be able to do that is if you do some pre-investigating, right? You got to get these subpoenas out. You got to get some kind of investigative subpoenas probably to get these documents. But at the end of the day, none of these drug task forces have enough time to do that. Right? They're getting a tip here. They're pulling some whatever. They're hitting the house, taking whatever they can. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and the amount of it that's going on, the volume of these kind of things inhibit the ability to do those kind of investigations. It's not like that. We know what these investigations look like. It's actually kind of insulting. If he's talking about being able to keep property after they have some kind of financial records to be able to justify that, the things that are being used to get into houses and the allegations, especially in light of, the Michigan medical marijuana, are absurd, But, and it's interesting. Why is that? Is it because you get the bounty of or the booty of the raid that's waiting out there, so there's more of it, and they just do less investigating, so it's kind of rubbed itself in that direction, like, our job is to go out there and raid and keep. And,
the majority of the people can't fight it, can't afford to fight it, don't know how to fight it. And So a lot of, I don't know what the percentage of these forfeitures that go unanswered or unclaimed are.
Well,
and so they get a lot of freebies without any pushback. So it's easy.
and it becomes the norm, right?
Right.
Like if whatever Ted was talking about, that was like, okay, we are now going to introduce into the police academy teachings forfeiture. These are the rules. You have to be careful, though, because this is something that if it gets going the wrong way, it looks really bad in the police and it can cause all kinds of problems. Citizens will lose faith in police officers. They'll see you as an enemy. They'll no longer want you to come to their neighborhood. You'll be standing on the outside looking in. Be careful of this forfeiture. If you're going to do forfeiture, do it this way. And it should only be under these circumstances. And you never do this, and you never do that. And you got to investigate, and you got to do your homework before you can even consider taking another citizen's property. But if you do it, then you can take it. Prove it. It's easier to do it that way. You do your homework, show that they cannot establish, whatever. I'm not saying I like any of this, but I'm saying like at least it's the way it was trained. Okay, so you have that going on. Now, what happened? Is there more drugs? Is it drugs become a higher priority? Is there less murder? Is there less robbery? Is there less, retail fraud and whatever, assault and battery, rape? How do we get to the point where like whatever that was, we've got? It's not even in the radar of part of the investigation ever. I mean, I can't tell you. We ever see any of this stuff? Any kind of other investigation? The same crap every time. Just like trash pull and a smell, bam,
Yeah.
or a traffic pull stop and a who knows? But it's and you can see like it's so what I'm saying is I don't know if he's the professor we're speaking of, and he introduces it and gives all the warnings and this part of controlled substance investigating. How do we get to where we are where the investigators are so terrible? There's like no investigating, like literally none.
Because they get away with it doing so little for so long.
But even if you
just
like
whittles away at it to where we're at today.
But we're talking straight out of the academy or straight out of the training. You know what I mean? My thing is like this is where go to school. This is the what do you call it, Jeff? Like the dogma, the doctrine. The doctrine of forfeiture is taught by Buddha, Nelson or whatever. You know what I mean? When you go to the Temple of Police Academy, he's the guy that's passing out the pamphlets, and you go listen to him, and he preaches the gospel. Okay, here we are now. What happened? Like, what got us? Like, there's got to be some fundamental break in that religion. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that principle. Like, there's got to be something that like shook the belief system that they got to this other way. What is it? I'm saying, is it that and I think it's money. I think it's going to say it's forfeiture money and the motive of seizing and getting these things. I mean, obviously this marijuana thing is just a low hanging fruit money grab, which is I think the reason for the increase. But you know what I mean? It also goes to this thing, Jeff, that I've tried to make my point about, which is, only upon the war on drugs could you ever have the number of opinions written by the judiciary across the country. The jurisprudence on the Fourth Amendment is probably fair to say it's more than any other.
Yeah, I would say so, and I think that if you look back at the history of it, that you find that we complain a lot about having lost civil liberties in the wake of 9/11 when they enacted the Patriot Act and whatnot. But our civil liberties were taken away long before that in the name of the drug war.
Well, and look, to draw that out more. I mean, this really like I would compare it to. Think about the different points in time throughout history. First of all, think about the different points in time. Like, what was there ever a time where citizens of the United States were? That you can think back where people were, their homes were getting raided and their property taken for something that was within the house.
Oh yeah, it goes back to the early days, the colonial days, when the king's soldiers,
pre-Constitution, I'm saying.
Oh yeah,
post-Constitution.
Well,
the whole point of it arose out of that.
Right.
It arose out of that.
It arose out of the fact that the British redcoats, the king's troops, the federal police, were given forfeiture power over contraband of the day, which was tea and tobacco. And they were given these roving warrants, writs of assistance, where they could go through warehouses and shops and stores and homes and barns and whatnot without any probable cause. And it led to selective enforcement of the law. It led to massive inequities and abuses. It led to a federalized, corrupt, militarized police force unconstitutionally enforcing contraband laws. And it led to the Boston Tea Party, and it led to the American Revolution, and it led to the Constitution, including the rights. And the Fourth Amendment says you can be free from that kind of shit.
Okay. And what I'm saying is, if you point out from that point, right, so our entire, the revolution arguably was, grown out of the idea that the government come in and take your stuff, period. And we weren't going to have it. And that's something to fight for and die for, and many did. And all of those founding fathers were not ambiguous on this. I don't think anyone was like, well, we should probably let them come in and take something. They can come. It wasn't that. There wasn't like there was a debate on whether they would or would not. It was like, well, they're not going to be able to. So, and think about it this way. We have the Second Amendment, right? People are like, oh, no. There's an absolute right. But it's really not. The law says clearly there's ways in which you can limit the Second Amendment. If someone's not even deemed crazy anymore, that's not the right way to say it. I apologize. But
if they have been...
no, it's not true anymore.
If
they pulled that back.
Oh, yeah, they did,
They pulled that back. But anyways, if you have a felony conviction, certain felony convictions can preclude you from the right to possess a weapon. Being intoxicated, can't possess a weapon, and I would never admit this in public, but I think there's arguments that can be made by the ATF that a medical marijuana patient arguably shouldn't, for their twisted, view on that. I'm saying that's the ATF position.
I guarantee there's probably a lot of cops at the bar tonight hanging out with their weapons. I guarantee it.
My point is, think about it, that how strong people feel about the idea of any bend on the Second Amendment, like talking about it is not allowed. Not a time to talk about it. Don't even talk about it. My Second Amendment right? Think of the Fourth Amendment. Trampled, destroyed, like hanging on like just bleeding and like guts everywhere, and put me out of my misery. It's crying, please. You know what I mean? And think about that. Like, there's no one like my Fourth Amendment rights. Don't even talk about it. But here we got
why is that?
$15 million dragged out of homes
because there's no enormous lobbying organization
what the hell is going
that lobbies
on
on the
that?
behalf of us for our Fourth Amendment rights. The Second Amendment has the NRA, which is one
we
of the
should start a
lobby
group that's called
the
National Fourth Amendment Rights Association. Seriously.
National
and
Stay the Fuck Out of My House
and this crap.
organization.
We need some donators.
And we most definitely lost it in the drug war. I mean, really did. What became reasonable suspicion to stop?
Nixon!
Yeah.
The damn Nixon! Okay.
But some of the justifications, there's this famous dissent from this guy, Judge Wiener in the Fifth Circuit, where he goes through the history of what is reasonable suspicion to stop. And he says, we've held stops justified on the grounds that the vehicle was suspiciously dirty and muddy, or that the vehicle was suspiciously squeaky clean, that the driver was suspiciously dirty, shabbily dressed and unkempt, or that the driver was too clean. The vehicle was suspiciously traveling fast, or was traveling suspiciously slow, or the old car, the new car, the big car, the station wagon, the camper, the oilfield service truck is the kind of vehicle typically used for smuggling aliens. The driver would not make eye contact. The driver made eye contact too readily. The driver appeared nervous. The driver appeared too calm, and on and on and on. This shit just went away, It's the time of day. Oh, early morning, mid-morning, late afternoon, early evening, late evening, middle of the night. That's when they tend to smuggle contraband. The vehicle was riding suspiciously low because it was overloaded, or suspiciously high because it was equipped with heavy-duty shocks and springs. The passengers were slumped suspiciously in their seats, presumably to avoid detection, or the passengers were sitting suspiciously ramrod erect. The vehicle suspiciously slowed when being overtaken by the patrol car traveling at a high rate of speed with its high beam lights on, or The vehicle suspiciously maintained its same speed and direction despite being overtaken by a patrol car traveling at a high speed with its high beam lights